with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chung at Wong Partnership, who is one of the co-chairs of the Artificial Intelligence Group.
Thanks very much, Hannah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time to join us on this WLG seminar today, jointly organized by the WLG Artificial Intelligence and the Life Sciences groups. And we're very excited today because, it's a rare opportunity for us to be showcasing client innovations adopting AI in the life sciences and healthcare sectors. And I think that's another unique feature where we've, managed to collaborate. And a nice shout out to Richard from the Life Sciences group. Thanks, for making this possible. So my name is Chung Yan, and as Hannah mentioned, I co-chair the AI practice at group at the WLG. I'm standing in for Peter Ruby, who is unfortunately unable to join us today on account of illness. And we're indeed, as I've mentioned, very excited and honored today to be showcasing the innovations of our two guest companies, Call Connect. I hope I got that right, Victor. And UK AI. So Call Connect is a Swedish startup. It has a solution which is a check-in buddy for the elderly, and it started its solution as being potentially something that can help us solve the silver tsunami that we're all going to be seeing pretty soon. UK AI is a Singapore-based company which has a team of data scientists, technologists, domain experts. They have a single mission, which is to unlock the impossible by creating AI capable of making accurate predictions in areas such as healthcare cost, risk, anomaly. I think what we'll be doing today is to first invite our respective guests to share a little bit about their innovations and how AI features in their product offerings. And then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion. And, I think there will be some interesting opportunities for us to share ideas because, you might be able to then see perhaps AI from an Asian perspective and also from a European perspective. And I think, it's this exchange of ideas that, is going to be all the more enriching. So maybe I will first call upon Victor to share perspectives on Call Connect. Victor is the founder of Call Connect. And over to you, Victor.
Thank you so much. I'll just start by sharing my screen. One sec. All right. So do you see the slides in full screen? Perfect. Thank you for having me. And I'm a non-technical founder. I've worked in a lot of high-tech companies, but I'm not an engineer myself. Call Knut is part of Smile, the incubator based out of Lund in the south of Sweden. And that's how me and Jonathan have been in contact. And we call Knut a check-in buddy for the elderly. And just to give you some insights into who I am, this is not my first startup. I've started a few different companies, mainly in the post-production and 3D animation world. So I worked for a long time in the film industry. And I've also worked at a few other fintechs during the latest 7 to 8 years. But Call Knut is sort of a passion project for me. It's Knut is the name of my father. So the idea came around an issue that I have with my father. And what we aim to do is really to help with the secondary aging. So you have the primary aging, which is something that all of us will go through, where muscles, skin, skeleton, etc., is aging. The brain, all of that. But the secondary aging is, of course, that could be specific for some of us. It could be you reach dementia, you feel loneliness, you get diabetes, and of course this takes the expression of this is of course different for different people, but one area that I found really interesting is the loneliness aspect. And I'm going to scare you a bit because I have a few slides that are I know that for my friends in Asia, this is kind of really scary. So this is actually a headline from a Swedish magazine in November of 2019. And that's really one of the points for me where I understood that the issue that I have with my father, and yes, my father is still alive, so this is not him, but that there's a lot of elderly people, especially in the Nordics and Northern Europe, that are living alone and might not have that many relatives. And this man that they found in central Stockholm was dead for 3 years. And it's not an isolated problem in the Nordics. Actually, the year after, they found a dead man in Norway, in Oslo, and he had been dead for 9 years. So that's some of the background. And as you know, we also have the so-called silver tsunami happening. So if we look at where we were 2 years back and are looking 30 years ahead, especially for, let's say, Asia, it's going to triple. The amount of people, percentage of population over 75 is going to triple in the next 30 years. And as I mentioned, I have a background from fintech, and in fintech and in the financial industry, for the last 10 years, you've been talking about peak age, similar to peak oil, but peak age was that cross-section where there were more people over 65 than under 5 in the world. And that happened in January 2020. So it means that we live longer, we're becoming older, there's more of us being older, and there's less and less kids being born. So it means that there's less people that could actually work with healthcare. There's also less people that are going to be able to pay the taxes that we need to then build the hospitals, etc. So it is a silver tsunami. But what do we want? We really want our family to be okay. So this is my father, Knut. And what I had an issue with was that he is living in a city called Östersund, which is in the north of Sweden, and I live in the south. What I do is that I call him to make sure that he's okay. But sometimes I forget to call, or sometimes it's he goes to bed quite early, so it's late at night and I can't really call him, and things like that. So what we started to do was that we built a service that is actually a voice bot or a robot making calls, and it asks a couple of questions, and then over time we could then monitor and look for anomalies. And since it's a machine calling, we could build AI or machine learning algorithms and models that could be used for, let's say, dementia. We're looking at Alzheimer right now, and things like that. The interesting part about having a machine calling and not a human calling is also, of course, that it's available 24/7. And we do support 50 languages. So we could call to let's say, Mexico and speak Swedish or Spanish, or we could call to Mexico and speak Swedish because people are migrating. That's a really interesting part of Call Knut, I think, that we could support the language that is spoken by the person that we call. And you could imagine if a community would then set out to call all the elderly people in their community. When we started to look at this and started to present it, a lot of the municipalities that we spoke to said that they wanted humans to call, but that's more or less impossible. So to make a 2-minute call, that takes 2 minutes, and then you have to rest of it and then call the next person. That's 2 minutes. It's like there's just enough hours in the day to be able to call. What we could do is that we could call millions at the same time. So we've done some simulations just to test the phone networks, and then we could start 1 million calls per second. So the population of Sweden is 10 million today. So we could actually close to call everyone in Sweden in 10 seconds. Another interesting aspect of using AI and machine learning and having machines doing this is that I don't remember what my father said a year back, but our trained AI will. So that's the way that we could start looking for anomalies or sentiment changing over time, etc. And I just wanted to end with a legal issue that I think for the panel would be kind of interesting to highlight and discuss. And having worked in fintech and with the GDPR regulations that we have in Europe, and working a bit in the US, where different states have different interpretations of privacy issues, etc. I think this is going to be a big question. It already is, but it's going to be an even bigger question for companies like us that are building a global service and that could actually talk 50 languages, could be deployed in every single market, doesn't need any other infrastructure than phones. So this is something that we could already now see is going to be a sort of a legal issue for us. I'm just going to end it with that. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for that, Victor. And I think that was a great sharing, and it's somewhat reassuring, I guess, that a machine might look after me when in my old age. Well, perhaps I turn the floor now over to Stephanie Ang and Christina Teo from UCare AI. Stephanie Ang is the Chief Operating Officer at UCare, and Christina Teo, she's the CEO. Maybe, Stephanie and Christina, you could share with us in greater detail what it is that UCare does, and how you see AI making possible the kinds of solutions that you offer.
Yeah, great. So I'll just take you through a couple of slides so we can tell you a little bit more about ourselves and what we do. We're a deep tech startup, and we build and maintain award-winning enterprise-grade AI systems using online machine learning to predict insights years in the future, which helps our enterprise clients to firstly generate new revenue streams, secondly, match supply and demand, and finally, better manage, adjust, and price risk of individuals. In terms of our use cases, there are three main ones that most of our clients know us for. The first one is Algo Expect. This is a cost predictor that provides accurate, personalized total hospital bill estimates at the point of admission. So what this means is that if you enter any one of the Parkway Pantai hospitals and you are given a quotation of what your stay, how much your stay will be, we are providing that prediction to you using online machine learning. This particular solution has been in Parkway Pantai Hospital since November of 2018, and we've been able to achieve and maintain 82% accuracy. It is a 10-year contract, so we work closely with the client to further improve the system through change requests, etc. The second key project or product that we have is our anomaly detector. This is a solution that optimizes the claim procedure by flagging outlier medical claims, medical claims that do not meet appropriate financial schemes or medical plans, such as overservicing, overcharging, fraud, as well as potential abuse cases. For this particular solution, we've been able to successfully implement for non-disclosure at a private insurance company, where we were able to achieve 99% predictive accuracy. And last year, we actually deployed the system for the Ministry of Health in Singapore to do all their claims analytics. For the Ministry of Health in Singapore, it is a 7-year contract. So again, we're going to be working closely with the client to further improve the system as well. The last key product that we have is our risk predictor. We can use this in plenty of different ways, depending on what the client requires. But there are two main ways that we're using it now. First is to predict if a person's at high risk of rehospitalization in the next 12 months. Typically, insurance companies are interested in a solution like this so that they can better manage their policyholders. And secondly, the other way we've been using it is to predict if a person's at high probability of being COVID positive, so that we can then provide an end-to-end solution for scalable COVID-19 pool testing at low cost. So for the rehospitalization risk, we achieved 85% predictive accuracy. And for the COVID infection, we completed a successful pilot for Grab's employees in Indonesia, where we were able to identify the only COVID positive person within the entire group of people who were pool tested. So again, it does show and indicate a high level accuracy as well. So at this point, I thought I would just quickly show you a feature of our solution that was released on Channel News Asia. It tells you a little bit more about how we do our work and our project with Parkway Pantai as well.
And many more organizations are now looking into how they can implement artificial intelligence responsibly and prioritize earning the public's trust in AI. Geraldine Yap with more.
No one likes staying in hospitals, much less finding their final hospital bill much higher than what was estimated for them before the procedure. A Singapore-based startup, UK AI, has solved this problem with an AI cost predictor system. It generates a tighter estimate of hospital bills with more than 80% accuracy, considering unexpected complications and unplanned surgeries. This has led to a fall in patient complaints since the system was up in Parkway Pantai hospitals about 2 years ago. UK AI is one of 15 global companies that has adopted Singapore's Model AI governance framework. It's highlighted by IMDA as an example of how AI can be implemented to build trust in consumers. This includes explaining AI solutions to them in a way that is understandable.
When it comes to very powerful disruptive technologies such as machine learning, it's critical that you don't let the engineers like myself just go ahead and do stuff, right? You got to have some sort of guidelines, right, framework to making sure that we're deploying the technology in the way that the end users, the various stakeholders, are adapting it appropriately.
Sorry. So we do have a suite of other products that we can offer our clients as well. It really depends on what they're looking for. And a lot of our solutions can be applied to other verticals as well. So we started off with health. But the other verticals that we're looking into includes finance, travel, tech, edutech, just to name a few. In terms of data security and governance, I think in the video, Neil was talking a little bit about how we do it and how we build our AI models. But we are tried and tested by IMDA. IMDA is an accrediting body and it's part of the government here in Singapore. So when we were first accredited, they did a penetration testing report. So here's just a summary of the risk analysis that they did. We have also been featured in PDPC's AI governance white paper in both 2019 and 2020. And Christina has also been, Christina's our CEO, and she's also on the call today. She is currently on the PDPC's Data Protection Advisory as a committee member. Actually, some very exciting news that I didn't put here. Just a few days ago, PDPC and IMDA were at Davos, and they recently announced a new solution that they have, or rather a new framework that they've released called AI Verify. Because of our close work with PDPC and IMDA, we have been helping IMDA and PDPC in testing and providing feedback for AI Verify. So it's another way that we're working with the government as well to ensure ethical use of AI solutions and development of AI solutions as well. But just to summarize the way that we work with our clients and our core technology, typically how it works is our clients will tell us where their data sources are. From here, we will then build connectors that then sends the data onto our data warehouse. On our platform resides various algorithms. We use a microservices architecture, and that means a client can add and remove as many algorithms as you like. And on top of which, you can even, if you've developed your own algorithm, you can deploy it, or even an algorithm that you have open source, or perhaps you had another vendor develop as well, you can also deploy that on our platform. From here, we then build activators that then sends the prediction onto the client's front-end tool. If they don't have a front-end tool, we can also provide a very basic one or even integrate with a third-party front-end tool. It's really up to the client. Our latest solution is everything called AlgoBox, is everything within this dotted line. It's a ML ops platform that encompasses all the components, including connectors, activators, and is both deployable on cloud or on-prem, really depending on the client's requirements and what they need. This helps especially with clients who require something that's going to be on-prem. So it really depends on how our clients want to work with us, but just to quickly summarize, some clients want us to just do a one-time report, and we can offer that to them, or if they want us to provide something more self-service, typically for customers who already have a data science team or they have a strong IT team, we can provide just our ML Ops platform as just a monthly SaaS. If they want us to then come in and develop an algorithm for them, we can provide that to them. But I think for most clients, especially in developed countries, what they're really looking for is an end-to-end solution. So that's a custom algorithm, which we call our AlgoPacks, and then a custom AlgoBox, which is our machine learning platform. And this is just a one-time development, and we provide annual maintenance as well. And just as, oh, sorry, did somebody say something? Oh, okay. So just to quickly finish off, in terms of our leadership team, Christina here is on the call today. She's our co-founder and CEO at Harvard and NUS grad. She was formerly the CEO of Peter Lim's investment arm, and she's also an independent director for various groups as well. Her founder and CTO, Neil Liu, who was on the video earlier, is an MIT Wharton grad, and he has 30 over years of experience in various high-tech companies, including Google. We do work with various advisors as well in different spaces, and depending on the solution that we're developing, we do work closely with them to ensure that we're developing something that makes sense for the industries that we're working in as well. So I think that just summarizes who we are and what we do. At this point, I'll just pass the time on to the
Chris?
floor. Yeah.
Chris, would you like to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, so I think Stephanie had just given an overview of what we have been doing. I think what's really exciting with AI Verify that IMDA has been pushing, it's not just being responsible, but a way to verify and to repeat the same solutions again and again. And I think this will also give more credibility and trust for AI adopters. I think one constraint we've seen is in the earlier part of the AI development, there are a lot of constraints, right? It's about governance, about restrictions. But with AI Verify, I think it's a good balance that Singapore is trying to push for, to balance both innovation of using, adopting these solutions, at the same time being able to responsibly account to the users, to the beneficiaries, as well as your clients. So I think that's something I thought it would be a good starting point from Singapore, and hopefully more people all over the world will start adopting this.
Great. So thanks, Stephanie and Christina, for your sharings. I think that was a great introduction for us to understand how AI is playing an increasingly important role in solutions that you're providing. I think what stood out listening to both of your presentations, Victor, as well as Stephanie, Christina, is that you have tremendous repositories of data. And, Victor, you were mentioning you can do millions of calls in a very short amount of time, and your solution can remember conversations that took place 10 years ago, for example. And, Christina, Stephanie, likewise, I think a lot of the prediction models that you have are founded on data and the repositories of data that you have. Alongside this, we hear a lot about how businesses these days are talking about data is the new oil, right? And a lot of business models are certainly built around exactly that, the sorts of business insights that you can glean. What are your thoughts, in terms of the kinds of opportunities that you see in developing around data, and do you see yourselves also kind of putting limits on how you're going to be using these repositories of data? Maybe, Victor, you want to kick off first with your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In our case, we actually will not share the call between the elderly and the machine. So that has been one way for us to say, like, it's nearly as talking to your psychiatrist or the therapist. So we will treat the machine that way. In the beginning, we thought that might be an issue for the municipalities that we want to work with, but actually they consider that much better. Because I think, as you mentioned, data is the new oil. With too much data, it's also going to be scary, because what happens if and when there's a breach? So our approach has been that we will treat the dialogue between the elderly person and the voice bot or the machine as something that is sacred. Then, of course, we need to have groups of people that we could listen into, similar to how you train all your models today, where you have a different consent to be able to then predict stuff. But that's one way that we're solving it in. I think that the biggest issue for us is going to be that different countries today, or even regions of countries, have different interpretations. So that will be an issue, I guess.
Yes. Well, I think that's definitely something that we will be, having to share some perspectives on very shortly. But maybe before that, Christina, Stephanie, what about your perspectives? I do see, for example, that you work with a lot of insurance companies, and clearly, they are very interested in understanding risk and actuarial kinds of estimations and all that. So you have this tremendous amount of data. What are your perspectives on, how you're going to be a data steward?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, a lot of people think data is the new oil. And of course, when we're building our technology and our solutions, we do require a large quantity of data in order to do this. But I think the other problem is with clients who don't have any data and what they do. So because we've worked with so much data in the past and we do have access to data, we actually see this as an opportunity to develop new solutions around the data that we have been able to consume so far. So one particular product that we are going to be offering soon is called data packs. So what data packs are synthetic data that has been transformed by our proprietary data synthesizer. And these data packs enable companies with limited data sets to accelerate training, testing, and deployment of machine learning models and simulations. But most importantly, I think what it addresses is the data privacy concerns associated with real data and having access to that real data, as well as any concerns of data blending and reducing the bias in real data with synthetic data diversification, especially when we're working with clients in countries such as Indonesia. There are a lot of regulations around data residency. So previously, you know, when we were working on a couple of projects, it was a challenge because at that point in time, not many cloud providers had created their data centers at that point in time. So, you know, in order to do any sort of remote work, it was very challenging because, I mean, how would we access the data whatsoever? But of course, when using this synthetic data, it does overcome some of these issues that we might have and we might face as well.
It's interesting you raised this term synthetic data. Could you maybe give us a sense of what synthetic data might actually mean, and you know, in a way that lawyers might understand?
Sure. I'm not technical either, so I also have to, you know, simplify it for myself as a non-technical person. So what synthetic data is artificially manufactured data, which is generated algorithmically from simple rules, statistical model simulations, and various other techniques that describe the characteristics of real data. This type of data is de-identified and it's completely randomized, that it preserves the cohort, trends and distribution in order to produce the same predictive outcomes as real data. What we've been reading so far and what we've been seeing as well in the industry is that synthetic data will completely overshadow real data and AI models by 2030. So I think this is typically where the direction is going in terms of data uses, etc.
And nonetheless, this is all based off the raw data sets of, you know, identifiable individuals that you may have had. But of course, by the time you repackage it into synthetic data, then it would have lost the identifiability part of it, though the insights can still be extracted.
Yeah, because it's no longer real data at that point in time. It's completely randomized and you would never be able to re-identify it. I think the difference between synthetic data and data currently used, which typically is de-identified, is that even when it's de-identified, it's still pretty easy to re-identify the person. You'll still have information about the person that's rather sensitive, and therefore, I mean, it wouldn't take long for a person to re-identify the person or the data points that they're looking at. But with synthetic data, it's very highly unlikely.
And I think that's a nice segue, you know, to the question, Victor, that you had posed as well in the course of the presentation, which is that, you know, the fragmentation of regulatory policy, right? That different countries are imposing different standards as to how data ought to be treated, and even, you know, as to more fundamental questions around how you ought to be using AI. You know, I think that's the perspective that Stephanie shared. It sounds like a kind of a technical solution to solving some of this kind of a problem. But maybe, you know, I could invite Victor and also Stephanie, you, Christina, you know, what have been some of the challenges and approaches or solutions to indeed scaling your products internationally, addressing markets with these sorts of, you know, very different kinds of approaches to regulation. Victor?
So we're currently just in Sweden, but what the solution that we're aiming for is to actually be consent driven. So we actually ask for the consent of the elderly person. And I think this is going back to when I worked in fintech and worked with a lot of the major banks throughout Europe. When Europe introduced GDPR, the 25th of May 2018, when I discussed that with our partner banks, some were just like, that's nothing. It's we've done this for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And some of the smaller ones, the neobanks, they panicked because they didn't have a clue about privacy, integrity, etc. So I'm kind of schooled in that way that at the end of the day, if you consider the financial system, number one is privacy and integrity, and number two is making money. Because if we as consumers or customers to a bank would start to even slightly wonder if they would track our data, where we had our insurance, where we used our cards, what we bought at the grocery store, all of that, and built profiles of us, we would leave that bank. We would all go back to cash. And they know that, so they don't do it. And I think that has been really good for me going into this, that I'm schooled that way, that it has to be consent driven. It has to be with a large amount of integrity for the users. And I think it's just, when I started with this, the whole debacle about Google Health was just blowing up. And that was only that they didn't have consent. So I think that was a good reminder for me in the summer of 2019, that even large companies could sometimes go wrong. And it was about the consent. They bought the hospitals, they scanned all the x-rays, they built their visual AI models for oncology, but they forgot one thing: to ask the person that the x-ray belonged to. And of course, it's all about consent. So from our perspective, that's the primary thing. Then I guess, since the regulations will be different, and I think it's interesting, the whole could you move data between different regions or cities or municipalities? That's always going to be an issue. And for us, it's been we're building a product that could be super flexible. We could store the data with the municipality if needed. So things like that. But consent is the number one thing for us, really.
No, it does sound very much like, you know, what we the lawyers talk about a lot, the concept of data privacy by design, right? That systems are built from the ground up, designed to address some of these regulatory frameworks. So, you know, I guess, you know, Christina, Stephanie, would you have any perspectives to add to that?
Well, I suppose that the way that we work internally is that we've always followed strict internal guidelines to follow various PDPAs, because our goal was always to expand overseas. And we always realized that there would be some issues doing that if we didn't already have those guidelines and those processes in place. So it did make it a lot easier for us to start working with IMDA and PDPC when developing their own frameworks and providing the feedback for that. Right. But of course, you know, going into a market in Europe or in the US is a completely different ballgame than being in an APAC market, and it'll also come with its own complexities. But I think we've been quite blessed that our founder, Neil, has always been pretty strict when it came to us being compliant on various regulations. So we already had those habits in place.
Yeah. So it sounds again like, you know, having had those building blocks in place and a kind of an architecture that would allow for you know, expansion in a way that allows for you to kind of navigate some of these different frameworks has definitely helped.
Yeah, definitely.
I just want to add, because I think sometimes, and that's what I like about the UCare technology, is that being able to use the data and finding the patterns or anomalies is what makes us able to predict things. And I think that it's like two sides of it, that we have to understand that if we have the data and are able to collect it and still keep it safe, we could start to predict things. And with that prediction, we could save costs for someone going to the hospital, or we could save costs for a municipality because we could find out earlier than what is done today that that person is in risk of getting Alzheimer or similar. And I think that that's the big benefit of AI and ML. And we just have to, it's so hard because you need to navigate like both things. There is a strong opportunity, I would say, in terms of saving lives and also saving money for municipalities in the future within life science. And if you don't use data, and I have a super good example of this, and I guess Jonathan and if someone of his colleagues are on the call will just laugh, because we had the largest debacle with the Swedish police authority in, I don't know, hundreds of years. So we're a population of 10 million. And in the period of October and November of last year, 2 million passports expired. But the police authority doesn't have any tracking on trends and expiry dates, etc. So every single person out of those 2 million that needs a passport for this summer started to apply in March, and the whole system is crashed, and they are overbooked and they can't even produce the passport. So people are so angry, and it's really simple to fix it, because if you have a database of expiry dates, why isn't there just a red flag saying we're going to have 2 million passports? It's a lot expiring within 60 days. We should read to them, to the public, or anything. So I guess not using data will then more or less be worse than actually using data. So that's the thing with for me, that being able to make these calls to elderlies that are living alone, start to predict earlier on a quantified basis. It could be regions, it could be pockets of people within a community. Finding those early will both save life and money for the municipalities. So that's really why we're doing it. And
Oh, thanks for that. And I think, you raise an interesting point around the issue of trust, wrapped around this issue too of this challenge that we face, isn't it? Between deciding, do we use the data, or we don't use the data and miss out on, the ability to solve problems relatively easily. But what are the limits you think that ought to be put in place? Because a lot of the discussion around AI and the use of data is also centering on the question of ethical use of AI. So Victor, you've talked about building trust, and that in itself is something key to survival of many of these sorts of initiatives that we're seeing. Neil spoke about the ability to understand, right, transparency in AI algorithms. Maybe you could share respectively your perspectives on what you think are really critical issues that we need to be thinking about in terms of answering this question of ethical AI adoption. Maybe Stephanie, Christina, any you start first.
Sure, yeah. So, I guess the key for us is always to follow certain principles that we've put in place. I think, the government's AI Verify puts it quite well. They do have 11 specific principles in order to have ethical AI. I think one of the most important ones, I would say, is having human in the loop. having that feedback loop is quite important because there will be times where the machine learning algorithm will provide predictions that might not make sense to you. And that's where having that feedback loop not only ensures that there's transparency in what you've created and what you've developed and what the predictions are that you're giving to patients or the users, but it also ensures that you're creating solutions that are more accurate, because having that feedback loop also helps the AI or the machine learning programming as well. So that's just one specific way, but of course there are other types of principles that you can be looking at as well.
Christina, I think you kind of wanted to unmute yourself just now.
Yeah, I think from a very practical standpoint, regardless of the number of principles that we have, right? At the end of the day, we are enterprise, we serve enterprise customers. And then based on the solutions that we give them, the end beneficiary should be the policyholders and the patients. And we do not provide a direct solution to the patient. Therefore, I think in our go-to-market, in our sales strategy, I like what Victor said about making money should be secondary. We choose our customers very carefully, right? So if you can see, we tend to work with the ministries first, because it sets a baseline. And with the same baseline, then when we go for the private insurers and the private hospital providers, we can use the same standard and impose that on them, because the ministry is the first to adopt, and then the rest kind of have to follow suit. So these are some of the things that we try to incorporate into our sales strategy.
All right, great. Thanks for that. Victor, what are your thoughts?
No, I think it's super important, and especially the ethical side of our business is, of course, that we're going to have conversations with a lot of people. And we've seen in some of the tests when we started out, our services then calling the elderly, but we actually had people responding that they wanted to be able to call themselves when they felt lonely. Even though the questions are totally standardized, it's like, how are you? What are you planning on doing today? Just like super simple question, but there is a need. And I think that that's also, there is a responsibility for us in that sense that, for example, we're trimming the digital voice so it sounds like it's a machine. So we're not trying to make it sound like a human. We want to make sure that the elderly person understands that they're not talking to a human, it's a machine. So I think we're adopting a lot of those approaches in terms of the ethical side of it. Because I don't want to, when I started out, I didn't want to have something that could fool my father into believing that it was me calling. I just wanted to have some sort of check-in buddy that would call my father, ask a few questions, revert back to me and say, everything seems okay, or he's really tired. So, super simple. And that's what it started with. And we still work for in that principle that it's a check-in buddy. If the elderly person is saying, I feel super fine, and they don't, we can't do anything else. It's like having a check-in with your team. If someone is lying or not telling the truth, we can't do anything about it. So I think the ethical part of this is going to be really important, and I hope that more companies within life science and that are building digital services would adopt that. And I think the whole approach that the state of Singapore is having in terms of creating guidelines, etc., would be great. Because just this week in Sweden, we've had a few highlights in regards of digital pharmacies where you could order your medicine online. And they are using then an open API from Facebook to be able to, like, for cookies, etc. But they by default have shared the phone numbers of the people buying. Another is a digital health, like a video telehealth company based out of Sweden that have built a platform that single practitioners could use throughout the whole of Europe. and they did the same. They shared phone number and name. So if you hack that API, you could actually see that this person, Mr. Victor, with this phone number, has called a therapist with this phone number, and then you could see that that therapist is a specialist within an area. It's when you read about it and you start to talk about it, it's just like, why didn't anyone just raise a flag and say, yes, maybe we shouldn't do this? Maybe we shouldn't share data like this in regards of life science or pharmacies, etc., with Facebook. So I guess the ethical part of this is going to be not just for AI, but with digital services, is needed to be addressed.
Yeah, I think
and this was used in 1 week.
But that's a really important perspective, you know, and you know, I'm just also conscious of time. We have about 5 minutes left. Maybe I can you know, throw open the floor to questions. Does anyone want to make any comments or pose any questions to the panelists?
Yeah, hi, this is Manu Davar from Arnold & Porter in the United States. Thank you for a really interesting conversation. I was curious for the panelists and for the other attorneys on the phone, what your thoughts are in your various jurisdictions about where the line from AI-enabled healthcare could cross over into medical practice. So one of the issues that we wrestle with in the U.S. Under our state and federal regulatory scheme is figuring out whether an algorithmic, let's say, clinical decision support tool or population health support tool is actually replacing the independent judgment of a physician and therefore regulated like a physician or regulated by the FDA. I was curious from your different perspectives if you all have seen a neat regulatory solution or legal solution to that still enables innovation.
Thanks, Manu. So
I could just give a quick response from our side. What we've decided is that we're not going to do the sort of diagnostic. We're only going to give a trend. And that trend could then be taken by a practitioner or a municipality or the relative if we consider consumer service. So we will not do the diagnose of a health issue, only the trend. Just to more or less duck under the FDA or similar.
Stephanie, Chris?
Yeah, I think in the case of UCare, we approach it from medical necessity. Just because a few doctors have certain practices and these are in label and also admissible insurance claims doesn't mean that it has the right treatment efficacy. So we are actually looking at this from a machine learning standpoint, both supervised as well as unsupervised machine learning. So actually, we actually don't look at clinical pathways per se from a diagnostic standpoint, and we tend to be a bit more prescriptive as well as classification. So I'm not sure whether I can really answer that question in that sense, but I think as far as we try to you know, lower the cost from the cost standpoint by looking at over-servicing and unnecessary treatments that may not cause harm to the patients, but at the same time, it actually creates a lot of cost issues within the ecosystem.
Thanks for
Thank
that.
you.
Any other questions?
Hello, good morning.
Hi.
This is Alejandro Luna from Santa Marina y Estete in Mexico. Has any of your products been designated, or could there be a risk that they be designated as medical devices and be regulated as such?
I could start. We're actually looking at doing an MVR in the future, but not now. And since we're not doing diagnostics, we're only doing analytics. Then I usually refer to us as the thermometer you have in your ear to check if you have a fever. That device is actually not going to be able to tell you that you have a fever. it could point you towards that you might have a higher or lower temperature, and then it's you or the physician that will tell you that you have a fever. So we want to be the same. We want to be that thermometer. You're saying there's something off, and I could only see to my own family. We all have different baselines in terms of temperature. So 1 degree up or down for me will probably be 1 up for me, 1 point up will be the baseline of my son. So it all depends, and so that's the way we're approaching it.
For UCARE, at least, I don't think we'll ever be looking into medical devices because our space mostly is in the predictive analytics and not clinical so far.
Until somebody knocks on the door for a collaboration, I guess.
You never know. You never know. If you know of any, you can let us know.
I think that invitation is thrown out to everyone else on this call. Anyone else has any other questions? Okay, it's you know, we're top of the hour. It's 10 o'clock. You know, I think we've had a really interesting, you know, discussion today. I'm just very grateful to all the panelists for your insights. You know, it's really helped us to understand how AI is deployed in real practical terms, and you know, to give us a perspective as to how we as lawyers ought to be also thinking about the adoption of AI and trying to help work with clients, you know, to find solutions to some of the problems that we've been talking about, whether it's in terms of compliance with cross-border regulatory challenges, or for that matter, ethical issues in the adoption of AI. So, you know, thanks very much to the panelists and also to everyone else for taking time off your schedules to be with us today. If you do have any questions at all, you know, I'm quite sure we'd be happy to send them on to the panelists. Please, you know, drop Hannah or myself an email, and then we will be in touch, you know, to help address your questions. And of course, as Hannah mentioned earlier, I think we will be making a recording of this available, and this will be accessible online. All right, so thank you everyone for your time and for your participation. We look forward to you joining us for our next events. Thank you.